In this video, we're taking a look at a very special 1969 Plymouth Barracuda. Now, the car itself is pretty rare. What's really special about it now is what's resting under the hood, which is a one-of-a-kind prototype engine called the Ball Stud HEMI. This engine was developed in the 60s and it was supposed to hit the market by 1972. It was a smaller and lighter version of the Hemi. It had a totally different cylinder head combination. This thing was very different than your standard street Hemi, which was 426 cubic inches. The Ball Stud Hemi, which got its name from the valve train configuration, where it didn't use shaft-mounted rockers, it used ball stud rockers, kind of like a big block Chevy. So a lot of people say these heads are very similar to a Chevrolet design, even though they do still have a hemispherical combustion chamber. So even though the plugs don't go down through the valve covers like the traditional Hemi, this still does kind of live up to its name. The issue with this engine was that by 1972, the world had changed. The muscle car era was coming to an end. There was going to be no such thing as 444 cubic inches with the kind of horsepower this thing was going to create. It went away. The whole idea was basically scrapped, and unfortunately, all of the testing and development engines were scrapped except for this one. After this engine escaped the scrapyard, it ended up in the hands of Dick Landy. Now, he truly knew the significance of this one-of-one prototype engine, and he held on to it for many years. But eventually, he was talked out of it. He ended up selling this engine to a guy who did something that is pretty controversial. Now, there's a video on Uncle Tony's Garage that tells a little bit more about the details of what this guy did. But essentially, he took this one-of-one engine and started cutting on it. He bored it 30 over, he ported things, he changed the crankshaft, he changed the camshaft, he changed the intake manifold. He did a lot of work on this engine, and it did make a very unique setup. It's now 481 cubic inches. It probably makes more horsepower and it's more efficient than that original design, but it really lost a lot of that wow factor and originality. I mean, these were the pieces that those engineers put together back in the day. The car itself has some significance as well because it was bought as an original 440 equipped car, which was really rare to begin with, and it was sent directly to Sox and Martin to be prepared for superstock drag racing. So this car ended up getting passed around to several people through the years, including legendary Mopar guy Tom Hoover, who actually put a small block Mopar engine in it and raced it for a few years and got a little bit of press out of it. But this car eventually, it changed hands several times and ended up in the hands of the same guy that had the one-of-one prototype Ball Stud Hemi. And when that happened, he married the two together, put the Ball Stud Hemi in the Barracuda, finished this thing out, got it back to where it's in running and driving condition, and then actually it ended up selling again multiple times, and now this car lives in the National Auto and Truck Museum in Auburn, Indiana. So they take this car to shows and cruise-ins and they tell its story, but there's only so much you can say on that signboard, and to the casual car guy who's just passing through, he might not notice what's going on here. He might not notice the significance of this engine, and this deserves a story told on it, and it's got a lot of press through the years. There's been videos, there's been magazine articles, there's been all sorts of press done on this engine and this car. And if you want to research it further, there's lots of articles on the internet about it, videos. Uncle Tony's Garage did a video where he talked about some of the modifications that this guy made to the engine. Whether you like it or not, there's not much you can do to go back to original for this one-of-a-kind engine. So it does kind of hurt my heart a little bit on the historical side, but I am glad to see that this car is functional, it runs and it drives, and it's truly a piece of Mopar performance history.